Happy Friday, Blue Demons. Welcome to this morning's episode of Get to Know DePaul. We are going to be chatting with Dr. Lauren Hussar from University Counseling Services. As a reminder, before we get started, you can check into today's screen by scanning the QR code pictured here. We'll put it up again at the end of the stream, but we'll be picking one viewer from each of the streams from now until September 11th to win one of our coveted DePaul Lincoln Park map water bottles. So be sure to scan in. You'll scan that QR code and then log in with your Campus Connect credentials for that automatic entry. But we'll go ahead and get started. So Lauren, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So for those of you that might be new to chiming in or tuning in here and watching, our Get to Know DePaul series is designed for students to really do a deep dive into some of the different services and programs that they'll have available to them when they start here as a student back up in the fall. So Lauren, before we get started, how about we start off with just a little introduction? So tell us who you are, where you're from, how long you've been at DePaul, and anything else you'd like to share.
Sounds good. So I'm Lauren Hussar. I'm a psychologist in University Counseling Services. I use the pronouns she, her, hers. I have been working at DePaul since 2015, so I'm coming up on my 5-year anniversary. That both feels like forever ago and like just yesterday. It's so bizarre. Let's see who I am, where I'm from Maine originally. I grew up in Maine. I went to undergrad in the Boston area, and then I came out to Chicago for grad school about 12 years ago, and I've been here ever since. Did I miss something?
No, I think that's great.
Okay.
When did you start? Do you remember what your start date was?
My start date, it was like right around the beginning of the fall quarter in 2015.
Oh, nice.
I think right before students started. So around now-ish.
Yeah. I just had my 5-year anniversary 2 weeks ago. So I'm right there with you.
Oh, we're happy anniversary.
Yeah, it's crazy. It just feels like I blinked and suddenly it's been 5 years. It's just absolutely insane.
Yeah. When people say like, oh yeah, 2015, I've been working here. I'm like, oh, 2015 was so long ago. I'm like, no, actually it was 5 years ago. Or I feel like it was just yesterday, but it was actually, time is weird.
Yeah. So how about you tell us a little bit about University Counseling Services? Like, what do y'all do? Where are you located typically? Just a little bit about what UCS does at DePaul.
Sounds good. So University Counseling Services, we provide mental health services for currently enrolled DePaul undergraduate and graduate students. We pre-COVID, we still have physical locations. So we are located here in Lincoln Park and the Student Center, as well as down in the Loop. We have an office in one of the buildings down in the Loop. Right now, we are all working remotely. I'm in my office right now in the Student Center. So this is what it would look like if you were coming into University Counseling Services in a prior world, but we're doing all of our services virtually now. So we will be using Microsoft Teams to do counseling sessions. So like I said, we provide the mental health services for currently enrolled students. We provide short-term individual therapy, group therapy, and we also have a psychiatrist on staff. Our office is staffed by licensed clinical psychologists like myself. We have one psychiatrist, and then we have several master's level graduate students who are working toward their doctoral degrees under our supervision, who also see students here. So everyone in our office either has a master's or doctoral degree. Let's see, we do a lot of outreach events, kind of like this one, where we kind of go around the campus and kind of talk about our services and what we offer. We provide resources about different psychoeducational topics like stress management, conflict resolution. We go into the residence halls when things are normal. We'll be doing a lot more telereach events, different workshops that students can kind of drop into on a virtual basis throughout the fall and coming year as well.
Yeah, and Bill Johnson, one of the staff members, he's doing a virtual series right now this summer as well, isn't he?
Yep, he's doing, I think it's on Monday afternoon. It's a mindfulness workshop. He's been doing that all summer. I think it's had a pretty good turnout, some weeks at least. So I believe he'll be continuing that into the fall. I'm not 100% sure about that. But yeah, he's been doing a Mindfulness Monday workshop.
Yeah. So I think that leads to another question that students might have. So is UCS individual meetings or is it group meetings? Or what do interactions look like when a student interacts with counseling services?
Good question. So for individual therapy, that is on a one-on-one basis. You meet one-on-one with a counselor for about 45 minutes, usually once a week. Sometimes we meet with students less frequently than that, like every other week or once a month after kind of a relationship has been established. But we do offer group therapy too. And I know group therapy is not usually what students are thinking of when they think of counseling. It can be a little intimidating. So our group program, we're going to be having 4 or 5 groups, I believe. They'll be held over Microsoft Teams. Dr. Rachana Doshi is our group coordinator, and then we have some staff members and some of the trainees co-facilitating the groups. But in groups, there's usually about 6 to 10 other students, 2 or 3 co-therapists who lead the group. Those groups are held once a week, also virtually, like I said, and they're a little bit longer than individual therapy. They're 90 minutes total. Our groups are all kind of open general groups. So it's not like there's one group for students who are experiencing depression and one for students who are experiencing anxiety. They're all just kind of general interpersonal process groups is what we call them. We do have one group for only female identified students. And usually when I'm talking to students about group therapy, it is intimidating. It's scary to, think about talking about your problems with other people. You don't know who they are. You don't, it can be really vulnerable. But I think something that I would encourage students to keep in mind is, mental health stuff is often really, really isolating. A lot of the time I hear from students like, I'm the only one that is having a hard time adjusting to DePaul. I'm the only one that doesn't have friends yet. I'm the only one that doesn't know my way around campus, et cetera, et cetera. And I sit there and I think, oh my gosh, no, you're not. I know you're not because last hour, someone else was in my office talking about this. And so in group therapy, students have the opportunity to talk with other people who are going through similar things. And so gaining that sense of community and kind of that sense that you're not alone in what you're going through can be extremely helpful in working through, common mental health issues that students face.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially now in the pandemic. I talk to a lot of students that similarly, they just feel this overwhelming sense of loneliness. And because we are not done with the pandemic, we are still very much living through it. So I think it is exactly what you're talking about. It's really critical to find those spaces and places, and UCS is a great way, and those group sessions are a really great way to find that, that sense of community, sense of belonging. And, in my opinion, like really realize that you're not in this alone. Like there are so many people that are going through similar things. So I think that's really great work that UCS is doing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. And I think, with group therapy, something else to add is like with individual therapy, like I said, it's more short term. We do have a session limit. I think the average number of sessions that students come in for individual therapy is around 6 or 7. But for group therapy, there's no session limit. So we have had students who participated in the same group for 2, 3, 4, 5 quarters, which is a really great way of kind of connecting with an office and other people here at DePaul. Mm-hmm. And like you said, we're just all going to have to find different ways of engaging and connecting with one another. It is weird to do this over, a virtual lens, but we're trying to adapt. So I think the groups will be a great addition to that.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Lauren, I think oftentimes, there's a little bit of stigma around taking advantage of counseling services. I'm curious if you can, just maybe give your thoughts, or I don't know if you all have like statistics around numbers of students who utilize mental health. I think that people sometimes, again, they see it as this stigmatizing an activity, but, like we're talking about here, it's really crucial for creating that sense of belonging and creating that sense of community. So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts or things you'd like to share about that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That is something that can be a really big challenge for people connecting with their office. And I think the stigma around mental health and therapy has definitely decreased. Even since I've been working at DePaul, I do feel like students in general are really open about, what they've experienced, what they're struggling with, that they're going to therapy. It can be a real sense of pride. Like, yes, I'm doing this to take care of myself. But just as with there is that increased comfortability, there's still a lot of stigma, especially I think for certain groups and populations, right? Like males. I think there's a lot of stigma for certain communities of color. There can be a lot of stigma. And I think, in the past, it's been true, and it still is true, that the mental health field is really dominated by white identified people. And, if you think about, the experiences that people of color perhaps have had with the healthcare system in the past, there's another layer that makes it even harder for them to come into our office. One thing I would emphasize is that our staff is very diverse. We have staff of different identities and backgrounds. And, if students have requests to work with an individual or a therapist of a certain identity, we do try our best to accommodate that. Research tells us you don't need to have, matching identities for therapists and clients, but if that's something that the student is more comfortable with, we'll definitely try and accommodate that. And a lot of times just taking that first step and walking into our doors can be really, really hard. Mm-hmm. One of the benefits of things being virtual now is you don't have to do that. You can just pick up the phone and make a call and schedule an appointment. I'll be talking a little bit more later in this presentation about how to connect with our office. But yeah, you don't even need to physically come into the office. You just call our front desk, talk to the receptionist, get something scheduled. It's very easy. It's very private. Our services are confidential completely. Your files with us are kept completely separate from your academic records. We're not able to share any information about any student that comes into our office in a clinical sense, unless, there's a risk of suicide or homicide, those serious issues. But generally, everything is very private, very confidential. That's one of the most important kind of ethical tenets of our office.
Yeah, well, and I think it's even important to note your office is a little bit off the beaten path. So it's even there's signs that people could go and find it, but it's not like, I work in student involvement in the student center on the second floor. It's a very public space. Yeah. We have these giant glass windows so people can see in. That's not the case for UCS. I mean, even in the student center here, you're in the third floor at the very end of a hallway and a very unassuming door. Yeah. So it's even a different setup from some of the other offices in terms of what they look like. So I think that, obviously that was done very intentionally.
Yeah. And, once you all get into the Student Center in Lincoln Park, you will see that it is like a maze, and we are hidden in that maze. So we're on the third floor, right down the hall from the dean's office, the Jewish and Muslim student life centers, tucked away back here.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit obviously about these sessions and what exists. So how do students either schedule an appointment or find out what groups are available that they could potentially join?
Mm-hmm. So the first step to connecting with our office typically is through a phone consultation. So what would happen is you would call our front desk. That number, I'll just say it, it's 773-325-7779. So you call that number, you'd either leave a voicemail saying, "Hi, I'm Lauren, I'm interested in learning about counseling," or one of our receptionists would answer. And then they would schedule you for an initial, it is a phone consultation. I was going to say, or in person, but that's prior to COVID. So they schedule you for a phone consultation with one of the staff psychologists within probably 3 days, usually 1 to 3 days of that initial phone call that you made. Then at the time of the phone consultation, I would give you a call. We'd talk for about 15 or 20 minutes. I'd ask you a series of questions, trying to get a better sense of what's going on, what services might be helpful for you to connect with. And then by the end of that phone call, I would have enough information usually to make a recommendation. So whether that's services here at UCS that I think might be a good fit for you, or if maybe I think you benefit from connecting with a different office at DePaul, or maybe a therapist in the community, I'd be able to make that recommendation and help you take the next steps in getting connected with whatever resource I recommended. So that's through the phone consultation is kind of how the ball gets rolling in terms of therapy.
That's great. And then, so does that phone conversation is both for individual consultations or a group? They don't just like walk into a group situation if they were curious for a topic?
No, the groups aren't really drop-in groups. We want to make sure
Right.
that the student is kind of prepared for what's going to happen and kind of knows what to expect. So sometimes at the end of that phone consultation, we'll say, I know you probably called thinking that individual therapy was something that would be really helpful, but I actually think group therapy would be really useful for you. And so we would be able to recommend either group or individual therapy. If we recommended group therapy and the student was open to it, we would kind of pass that student's information along to the group coordinator and kind of plug them into one of the groups. There would be a pre-group meeting before they joined the group so the student would have an opportunity to meet and talk with the group leaders and learn a little bit about the group, and then they'd be able to join. And then the groups will be starting probably 2 or 3 weeks into the quarter. We just have to make sure we kind of recruit enough members before we start them, because it would be a little awkward to have 3 therapists and 1 client in a group.
Yeah. Well, and that intentionality, I think it goes back to, that sense of community that we were talking about. Like, you're not in this alone. And I mean, we really do. I imagine UCS starts things, week 2, week 3, so that students have a chance to get their legs under them a little bit, figure out the flow of classes, the flow of their experience. So that's great that students have that chance to look into it.
Yeah, we usually tend to get really, really busy around midterms. It can, I think, take typically students a few weeks to be like, oh, this isn't going so well. I need a little bit of help. This is not what I expected. So if we encourage you to reach out as early as possible, because it is a little bit of a slow buildup, but things can get a little bit clogged up toward the middle of the quarter.
Yeah. So I know that there's always questions, particularly when we talk about counseling, about cost associated with them.
Yeah.
So is there cost associated with, either attending an individual session or a group session?
Not anymore. We used to charge a small fee, but we do not. So we don't take any sort of health insurance. You can come here without health insurance, and there's no fee for our services.
Great. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
So I know that we also oftentimes will have questions from students that they're interested in potentially seeing a therapist outside of DePaul. Perhaps they need a deeper dive into individual sessions. Can UCS help connect students with external therapists or make recommendations?
Absolutely. We do a lot of that. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying. There is a lot of stigma about therapy, but at the same time, more and more students are coming to DePaul with a history of being in counseling before. And so because we are more of kind of a short-term setting, we do a lot of case management is what we call it, kind of helping students connect with therapists outside of our office. So we would work with this so that if you wanted to connect with a therapist in the city, it would be the same process. You could just call, schedule that phone consultation. You could let the receptionist know, I'm interested in finding referrals, but then you'd go through that same process with one of our staff psychologists, and they'd be able to help you find someone through your insurance. So we would work with you to figure out what your insurance plan is, help you understand how to find information out about your mental health benefits, what the co-insurance, deductible, copay is, and what all those words mean, because that's very confusing. And then we have a pretty big list of psychologists, therapists, and psychiatrists who have either worked at UCS before or who that we're familiar with professionally, and that we know, these therapists have experience working with students. They're good. It can be a little intimidating to get a list of 500 people from your insurance company. It's like, how do I go about making a choice? But we have people that we know that we feel comfortable referring to you. So then we check the insurance, give the student the names of people who are in network with their insurance, and the student could kind of go and contact them. But yes, we do a lot of that, a lot of referral help.
Yeah. Well, and I think that service in particular, the in-network service, that is an important designation to learn when learning about healthcare. So in-network versus out-of-network, and what the costs associated with that are. So that's great that UCS offers that as a service.
Absolutely. I will say that I have noticed at least Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance, their PPO plan has waived all deductible payments, co-insurance, and co-pays for mental health treatment. So I think a lot of insurance companies are now offering mental health services for free.
Oh, that's great.
Also, largely because of COVID, and also covering virtual services too. So you'd be able to meet with a therapist remotely.
Yeah, that's spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
Well, great. So, I just want to take a second, remind folks, if you have any questions for Lauren, feel free to put them in the chat. We can display them on screen. But, Lauren, as we start heading towards the tail end of our time together here, is there, I know you've talked a little bit about the phone number. Are there other ways or places that students should go to get more information or to connect with UCS?
Yes. So our social media pages are scrolling at the bottom of this page. So we don't have much on there right now, but we are going to get more on there. We're trying to have more of a presence on social media and on the internet since, things are done virtually now. But that's, as you might imagine, not our typical forte of our typical expertise. But yeah, so University Counseling Services on Facebook, on Twitter, or I'm sorry, not on Twitter, but on Instagram. And then we have a Go page. Is that what it's called, Courtney?
Yep. Yeah. Just a website.
Yeah. So go.depaul.edu/UCS. That's the center's webpage on DePaul. And there's a lot more information kind of reiterating everything I've said today, talking about therapy, different kind of self-help resources, talks about group therapy. There's a lot of information on there. So if you have more questions, definitely go check out that website.
Yeah, sorry, I asked like, oh yeah, just the website, but I'm not quite sure why it does it, honestly. And I feel like after 5 years, maybe I should ask. But the thing that's always interesting to note about DePaul's websites, the like individual office websites almost always start with go. So they're always typically like go.depaul.edu/something. Like my office's website is go.depaul.edu/involvement versus like, obviously, if you go to like the general DePaul website, it's just depaul.edu.
Yeah.
But the thing that we always tell our students too, if you forget the website, if you forget everything else, Google is still a spectacular tool. You can go to, I'm sure you could go to DePaul Counsel, like search DePaul Counseling, yep, and UCS will pop up and you'll be able to find this website that way as well.
Yes, very easily. I mean, you could go just depaul.edu, type UCS in that search box up there. And I think it's like the second listing is our office's website.
Yeah, that's great. So for our viewers here, as we kind of wrap things up, I'm just curious, do you have any advice for our students? Either, we've got some viewers here today that are in quarantine, they're quarantining on campus for 2 weeks, or for our students as they start in the fall. And that advice might look different for those two different groups, but just curious if you have any advice to share.
I think, the biggest thing I would encourage you all, whether in quarantine or kind of a student coming onto campus regularly, first of all, for those of you in quarantine, hang in there, good luck. You're in good hands, but I guess the advice that I would offer is, try and be open to new experiences. So, typically I would say that to students coming to DePaul in like a normal year, be open, go to different clubs, different activities. And I would still say the same thing. If you think something sounds interesting, just at least go once, twice. But keep in mind that if you go just one time, you might not like it. It might feel weird. It's going to feel awkward, but give it another shot. Don't be kind of deterred by that initial first time, even if it didn't go so well. So yeah, I guess I just generally encourage students to kind of be open to trying new things, trying things differently than maybe they would have expected to try them when they were coming to college, and kind of be flexible in your expectations and kind of what you're hoping for yourself. Because I think a lot of times students, especially first-year students, come to school thinking, oh, this is what the college experience is. This is what it's going to be like. This is what my friends experience. This is what it's like on TV. And it's usually not like that at all. And especially this year, it's really not going to be like that at all. So on the one hand, that is disappointing. On the other hand, you have the opportunity to try and make your college experience into something that you want in a way that no one else has done before. So there's a lot of new opportunities, I think, if people are open to taking them and trying to shift maybe their expectations a little bit. So that was kind of a jumble, but I think, trying to be open and flexible are the two big recommendations that I'd have. Pieces of advice I'd have.
Well, and I think that's perfect. I think too, everyone, even when our first year students, when they started the application process for college, I imagine, it was back in September and October of 2019. And we weren't talking about COVID. We
Right.
weren't talking about living through a pandemic or living in a pandemic. So I think that openness and that willingness to adjust expectations and adjust your mentality as you head into it is really, really critical. So I appreciate you sharing that advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lauren, for joining us today. For our student viewers here, one of the things, if you haven't heard it before, that we say at DePaul, we have a campaign called Take Care DePaul. And the mantra of it is to take care of yourself, take care of each other, and take care of DePaul. And we do it in that order very, very intentionally. Taking care of yourself is really critical so that you can start to take care of your community and really be a great benefit. And university counseling services is a spectacular way to do that. So thanks again, Lauren, for taking time to join us today. For our viewers, if you didn't catch it at the front end of our experience, you can scan in and scan to check into this experience by scanning the QR code on the screen here. I'll leave it up for a minute or two after the stream ends. But if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments, either while the stream's going or at a later time, and we will be sure to answer them. But thanks everybody for joining in, and we will see you at 4 o'clock today as we talk with the Office of Multicultural Student Success. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.